Remember this one, the fracked integrity? From the moment I met that guy, I was pretty sure he was using the Democratic Party as a career ladder. And that's why he punches left and smears greens. And I did that video, and we outed him. But the guy who really outed him is on the show today, and I'm going to tell you about it. Max Blumenthal over at the Gray Zone did this great article, so we're going to talk about it right now. It was titled "The Green Billionaires Behind Professional Activist Network That Led Suppression of Planet of the Humans" documentary. You know that Michael Moore produced that documentary that talked about how, hey, we've been doing Earth Days for 50 years. Why is the Earth worse off? And it's basically because big oil and gas and Wall Street money has found a way to compromise the activists. And here's so let's. Upon the film's release, a who's who of self-styled climate justice activists proceeded to blanket the internet with accusations that Planet of the Humans was a racist, eco-fascist screed that deliberately advanced the interests of the oil and gas industry. The ringleader of the push to suppress Planet of the Humans was Josh Fox, the Oscar-nominated director of the film Gasland, which highlighted the destructive practices inherent in fracking. Josh Fox launched a campaign by calling for the documentary to be retracted by its producers. Josh Fox fired off a breathless email to a group of public relations professionals. A number of reputable websites are hosting this abomination, and I need your support in getting them to take it down, Josh Fox wrote. On April 24th, Josh Fox claimed he had successfully pressured an online video library, Films for Action, into removing Planet of the Humans from its website. His victory lap turned out to be premature, as Films for Action reposted the film and publicly condemned Fox's campaign to drive it into oblivion. The relentless push by Fox and others eventually triggered a statement by PEN America, the free speech advocacy group, saying calls to pull a film because of disagreement with its content are calls for censorship, plain and simple. And that's what Josh Fox was doing. Here's Films for Action. They tweeted this out. Planet of the Humans is worthy of good critique, but we don't support the campaign to have the film removed from YouTube, and we definitely don't support abusing copyright law in a clear case of fair use to accomplish that goal. So to try to censor the news that Josh Fox didn't want out there, what they did was they used a bogus copyright claim, which we're very familiar with here at the Jimmy Dore Show. When somebody wants to take you down, they launch a bogus copyright claim. YouTube immediately sides with that copyright claimant until things get cleared up. And that's exactly what they did. So that was a bogus way to censor. So that's that authoritarianism, that censorship for the left. But why would Josh Fox be so quick to want to censor somebody? Why? What was he afraid of? What is Mr. Fracked Integrity afraid of? Well, Josh Fox ties to the professional activist network extend to the funding network centered around the Environmental Grant Makers Association. Between 2012 and 2017, Josh Fox's film company reported grants totaling $2.5 million. Much of that funding came courtesy of the Rockefeller Brothers Cultural Innovation Fund and the Rockefeller MAP Fund, as well as the Ford and Park Foundations. Oh, boy. I think we know why Josh Fox wanted to censor that movie. Why he's pro-censorship and a transparent grifter. Because he's getting his money from these people. There it is, millions of dollars. That's who he's getting his money from. We know that matters, who you get your money from. We know that matters. These climate justice activists were bound together by support from the same family foundations, billionaire investors, and industry interests that were skewered in the film. So now you know why Josh Fox was so vocal in throwing every bullshit thing he could to try to stop this film, because it's his gravy train that they were threatening, and he's paid by the people the film was skewering. Renewable energy kingpin Elon Musk practically takes credit for the Bolivian lithium coup just months after planning a meeting with Bolsonaro ahead of the Tesla factory in lithium-rich Brazil. There's Elon Musk bragging about the coup. Also, the money man for John Fox's one-man show, which was, by the way, they fired him from the theater in New York where he was doing that because he's such a horrible person. And then and his money man was Elon Musk's money man. But let's bring on Max Blumenthal to sort all this out, the guy who wrote this article, and we'll put a link to it. It's unbelievable. He left no stone unturned in this investigation. Max Blumenthal is here from the Gray Zone. Hey, Max, how are you?
Good to see you. Jealous that I can't grow a ponytail.
You're just not trying.
You can't do it.
You're just.
But some advice: if you do it, you need to get like a bolo tie or a vest, because right now you just don't have ponytail energy.
You are. He's right about this. You are right about that. All right, so let's get into your article. Now, I just skimmed the surface. The stuff that you uncovered and the connections to the big business and money people is kind of remarkable. So tell me what did I leave out that you think I should tell people?
Well, you did a pretty good job, and it's a 9,000 word piece, so it's kind of hard to know where to start. But I can just tell you where I started was just from a visceral sense of indignation and disgust when I saw the coordinated campaign to take this film, which was executive produced by Michael Moore, he's a famous filmmaker, high name recognition, has, good friendly relations with the Democratic Party leadership. But it was actually made by two filmmakers, Jeff Gibbs and Ozzie Zahner, who are what I would consider grassroots environmentalists who have dedicated their lives to understanding what it will take to save the planet, and who have gone completely against the grain of the narrative that we're hearing from within the Democratic Party about climate change and a Green New Deal, and have produced a film that appeared for free on YouTube, Planet of the Humans, that really at its core was an anti-capitalist film that points to endless growth, endless neoliberal capitalist growth and consumption as the biggest problem, and shows the renewables industry to not be the solution, that we're not just going to be able to produce a bunch of electric batteries and solar panels and wind turbines to save us from climate change. And if you just look at climate change, you're only looking at part of the problem of the destruction of the earth. For example, all the electric batteries that are being produced to make the electric cars, which will be mandated for all California consumers in the next 10 years, those require humongous amounts of mining. And you mentioned the lithium coup in Bolivia. Well, lithium is one of the major minerals that will be required for electric car batteries to make Elon Musk's fortune. And his fortune is mostly government subsidized, even though he's a libertarian. So the mining industry is extremely excited about this transition to so-called renewables. And there's not even really any clear evidence that it will actually be possible to power this massive economy off of it. So they're offering an entirely different solution, which I think is more subversive and radical than what these people who have linked hitched their wagons to the Democratic Party star are willing to offer. And that does include Josh Fox. And so I was indignant when Josh Fox and Bill McKibben, who is like the guru of the climate justice movement, or what I would call the climate cartel, when they started this campaign to censor the film, it really reminded me of the campaign to censor my book, The Management of Savagery. It was about a totally different subject. It was about regime change in Syria and the US intelligence services working with extremist forces in the Middle East to advance geopolitical goals. But the same kind of echo chamber emerged where the forces that had been involved in Syria regime change actually came from my book, tried to prevent the book from even having an audience, prevent me from having a book tour, they tried to pressure my publisher into not publishing it. So it reminded me of what was happening. And so I went down the rabbit hole on this investigation. And what I found were that the people leading the campaign to censor the film had serious skin in the game when it came to this massive transition to renewables. And you mentioned Josh Fox, for example. He was really the attack dog, the leader of this campaign. He had an open letter, a sign-on letter, calling on the film to be completely retracted, even though I couldn't really find major factual errors in it. He made it seem like this film was like, you know, a really poorly done Leni Riefenstahl piece hyping up the Nazis when it was, you know, anything but. And the people who signed on to the letter, I noticed one person was named Tom Dinwoodie, who will be completely unfamiliar to everyone watching this. And then I noticed Tom Dinwoodie was the executive producer of Josh Fox's sort of monologue play that he was going to do in January called The Truth Has Changed, about fossil fuel industry disinformation and right-wing disinformation. And he was supposed to perform that play, as you mentioned, Jimmy, at the Public Theater in New York. But because the theater directors accused him of abusing all the staff, they canceled the play. And then he went to the New York Times and said that he's been told that he was too passionate, too loud, and too emotional. And Fox said, to me, that's distinctly cultural. That's a classic anti-Semitic trope. So basically, he blamed the theater for anti-Semitism. I didn't previously know he was Jewish even. But in any case, this guy, Tom Dinwoodie, you know, you look into who he is, and he is a quote unquote clean tech entrepreneur who owns over 30 patents in solar technology, who is a multi-millionaire, who is funding people like Josh Fox basically to take out his competitors and then to advocate for government policies. Fox is close to Bernie Sanders, who advanced these policies that mandate that they use the kind of energy sources that he has invested in or owns patents in. And Dinwoodie actually is the chief funder of something called the Rocky Mountain Institute. Tom Steyer, you remember him? He ran for office and no one could quite figure out why he was there, this billionaire. He's also heavily involved with the Rocky Mountain Institute. They've done recent events with Bill Clinton and Tom Friedman. It is kind of like co-directed by Richard Branson from Virgin. So you're looking at some of like the most pernicious oligarchs on the planet and their stenographers like Tom Friedman, or the politicians who advance their agenda. And they run something called the Center for Climate Aligned Finance, which basically takes the 4 biggest banks in the world who are responsible for the financial crash and destroying American homeowners in 2008, 2009, Wells Fargo, Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, JP Morgan, and they partner them with environmentalists to facilitate a transition in the global economy to net zero emissions. This is what we call greenwashing, where the most vicious corporations, the most rapacious elements of the capitalist system come basically do a PR branding campaign where they get to work with oligarchs and PR agents to brand themselves as environmentally friendly, like they're helping the earth. And meanwhile, they get to continue the same practices that they've been doing, in tar sands or in the Arctic, mining or drilling for oil in the Arctic. And that's what I found across the board with all of these campaigns being run by the climate cartel that was trying to destroy this movie, is basically they didn't want this movie showing what they were doing, palling around with billionaires, greenwashing big banks, and doing nothing actually in practice to save the environment.
So, I mean, were you stunned at what you found? Because I was stunned to find out that the guy producing Josh Fox's one-person show at the Public Theater in New York was this guy who's a billionaire inside the solar business. This and a money buddy to Elon Musk. And it's just, again, all those people that I'm stuck. I mean, that article is unbelievable, the stuff that you uncovered. And do you think they thought nobody was going to uncover this?
Yeah, they thought, well, I talked to a lot of friends, like lefty friends, about the film. And I said, I'm blown away by this censorship campaign. Have you seen this film? It's free online. It's really revelatory. Maybe you should look more into, this sort of green politics, the big green politics that, is advancing a Green New Deal, and think more critically, just the same way we think critically about foreign policy, and we think critically about all these other propaganda constructs. And they would all tell me, I heard that film was kind of, filled with factual errors, and I heard it was mostly old data, and basically the narrative really drowned out the film, the narrative pushed by Josh Fox and Bill McKibben and others. And looking into some of the attacks on the film, I went through them one by one, and I found that most of the attacks that you would find online were actually written by people who are in the renewables industry, people who actually work for wind or solar companies. And these aren't just like some plucky little grassroots small businesses. I mean, this is a $30 to $40 trillion profit center. And so when you step back and actually look at this vast industry, which represents the future of energy in this constantly expanding capitalist system, you see Al Gore, and he appears in Planet of the Humans in this way. Al Gore, the failed Democratic presidential candidate who conceded after George W. Bush stole the election. Then he reemerges, and you'll remember this, maybe some of the younger viewers won't, with a beard, and he's talking about planetary destruction, and he introduces this film, Inconvenient Truth, produced by this tech billionaire, Jeffrey Skoll, who's also funding all of this stuff. And what Jeff Gibbs and the Planet of the Humans shows is that Al Gore had actually already started an investment firm with a Goldman Sachs banker named David Blood, so Blood and Gore, called Generation Investment Management, to cash in on this gigantic profit center. And in 2013, David Blood from Goldman Sachs starts doing events with Bill McKibben, talking about how they are going to mobilize public support to bring in all of this money. So the film really shows Bill McKibben not just as this, humble person who cares about saving the planet, but someone who's acting as a public relations asset for the capitalist ruling class, the billionaire class. And that's what you see across the board here. So at the same time, another shocking part of the film that really opened my eyes.
Let me just make one. So it's kind of like what happened to the environmental movement, guys like Bill McKibben, Josh Fox. It would be like as if the Martin Luther King was given a bunch of money by a bus maker to advocate for a different bus, and that's how you fix the Rosa Parks problem. Right? It's kind of like that. Like, we don't need to fix the society or the system, the capital. We just need to get a different bus that has nicer seats. And that, to me, that's what it seems like. And they've been paid to say that because someone makes money selling that bus. And it doesn't fix the problem. And we all know, and the movie forwards, the problem is consumption. And if we saw what happened in the COVID, when capitalism shut down, the air and water got clean. And that's what I think that movie is pushing, is that what the environmentalists like Bill McKibben and Josh Fox are pushing is we need to keep expanding capitalism, growth, but let's just fuel it with a windmill that's made out of fossil fuels, and then the batteries have to be mined in a very destructive way to the planet. So it's not a win for the planet. It's actually a loss, because as capitalism keeps expanding, it keeps there's no way to get around using more fossil fuels and mining the earth of these rare earth minerals to make those batteries. So the real problem in that movie puts forth is the consumption, that we have to stop consuming. You can't have a goddamn a cruise ship that goes from Florida to Europe and burns as much as 5 million cars would take making that same trip. So this is the problem, is this unfettered consumption, and capitalism is based on growth and consumption and more. And that's the message, is like, hey, we got to have to do some serious curtailing of our consumption and our capitalism if we want to save the planet that will support us, right? So I just want to make that point. Okay, so now go on.
No, it's important to bring it back to that point. I mean, there's a reason why we don't see people like Bill McKibben partnering with anti-war groups,
right,
or partnering with anti-capitalist groups who are socialist in order to address the system of imperialism and capitalism that are raping the planet. And that reason is, I don't think Bill McKibben like sits in these smoke-filled rooms and says, what do you want me to do? Just pay me to do this. I mean, he has his convictions, but he knows also where the red lines are. So the Rockefeller Brothers Fund, which represents the Rockefeller oligarchic family, it's very, progressive today, didn't used to be in the past. When they helped set up Bill McKibben's 350.org, a lot of people don't realize this. This was a top-down operation set up by a foundation with assets over $1 billion, and it gets its assets through investments on Wall Street. When they set it up and Bill McKibben agreed to have them back him, like they back so many of these so-called climate justice groups, you're basically saying, I know where the red lines are. I'm not going to be too radical, and we're going to work together to help these companies like Goldman Sachs or Oxford University divest from fossil fuels. And the public sees that and they're like, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with divesting from fossil fuels? But Planet of the Humans took a closer look at this, and I went even further. And they went through the divestment campaigns and showed that while certain institutions would divest from Exxon or Chevron, for example, they just moved their assets into plastics, into McDonald's, into gigantic cruise lines, into Halliburton, which is an oil and gas supply company, or automobile companies, basically massive polluters, because they're continuing to perpetuate a capitalist model. And they get the stamp of approval from Bill McKibben and Naomi Klein and anyone else who's associated with climate justice. And the system just keeps chugging along. I actually looked at the Rockefeller Brothers Fund's own investments after they said that they divested from fossil fuels under pressure from these green climate warriors. And that's where I found Halliburton. I mean, how can you remain invested in Halliburton and say that you're supporting the environment? It just shows that the whole divestment strategy is a gigantic sham. And then, you mentioned all the minerals that are required for the electric batteries. I mean, the demand for electric batteries is going to increase 14-fold by 2030. And that has to do with policies that were just like the policy just mandated by Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, to forbid the purchase of new conventional vehicles and mandate that they be either electric or hybrid. So what does that mean? Electric batteries are heavily reliant on cobalt. Most cobalt comes from Congo, and it's mined there in often illegal conditions, almost always dangerous conditions, often by children. Last year in December, actually, a dozen plaintiffs from Congo sued Apple, Google, and Alphabet. And these are like the big tech companies funding the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, which will benefit from the way this Green New Deal, at least the way it's being interpreted by the Democrats. They also sued Dell and Tesla, Elon Musk, and accused them of, this is the exact language in the lawsuit, knowingly benefiting from and aiding and abetting the cruel and brutal use of young children in the Democratic Republic of Congo to mine cobalt. And we should also note that Congo is the site of the worst genocide since World War II, since the genocide of Jews and other minorities in Europe by Nazi Germany. It's completely ignored. And this war was driven by, it's a rush on resources, a resource war. So this is just like completely left off the table. It isn't discussed at all. And remember in July, when Elon Musk went on Twitter and basically bragged about being responsible for the coup in Bolivia. I don't know how he was responsible for it, but somebody tweeted at him, it wasn't in the best interest of people, the US government organizing a coup against Evo Morales in Bolivia so you could obtain the lithium there. Lithium is also important for those electric batteries in Tesla cars. And Elon Musk said, we will coup whoever we want, deal with it. That's the mentality of these big tech tycoons. And Elon Musk is a major funder of one of these climate justice groups called the Solutions Project, which is this giant Hollywood vanity project that is fronted by like Well, Josh Fox used to be involved with it, along with so many of these other figures that are pushing for a full transition and a Green New Deal. So it's just important to look more closely at what the agenda is and consider that this might not be an actual off-ramp for the crisis. It's just getting into another lane.
So everybody keep your eye on the scammers like Josh Fox and people who have been co-opted like Bill McKibben. And it's obvious that that's what's happened. And we need to rethink the greening of the world, because the way they're doing it actually creates more of a problem. And whether it be the mining of rare earth minerals for the batteries, or the stuff it takes to make windmills. You know, they can't recycle windmills, which is kind of ironic.
The blades just sit around right now, and some of them are the size of a football field.
Right. So anyway, so I encourage everybody. I'm going to put a link to Max's story. Go read it. It's got every paragraph is mind-blowing information about the corruption of the and the greenwashing of the environmental movement. Hey, everybody, this is the part where I tell you where all our live shows are, but there aren't any. And then this is why I tell you to join our premium program and get extra content, but nobody's got a fucking job. So just enjoy the video.